Next, in my wellness and hospitality interview series, I have a very special guest. It's such an honor to have Scott LaMont, Principal and CEO of EDSA, join me today. For those of you who don't know EDSA, they're a planning and landscape architecture firm. They work globally and have extensive experience in hospitality. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having us. Excited to have the conversation.
So, Scott, we'll dive right into it.
Sounds good.
What what have you seen happen in this industry in this last few years? What shifts are you noticing?
I think there's been, some noticeable shifts. I mean, everyone always goes back to like what happened during the pandemic and the shifts that happened immediately following, right? There was this surge of, it's been called revenge tourism, where everyone wanted to get out there and travel and find new experiences. And there's been a couple things that have stuck around from that, which has been pretty neat to see. One, from our perspective as landscape architects, we've seen such a greater appreciation for the outdoor environments, and that the hotel space is not just considered, the site itself, but the greater environment has become more important and more ingrained into the mind of visitors when they visit new properties. So that's been pretty great to see stick around. Some of the other components that I think are neat is, there was certainly a surge here in the US of domestic tourism and regional tourism. Folks were getting out not too far, but getting out within, a little bit outside their own communities to find new destinations that they may have passed over in years past. And those have formed a few new habits and have created some new trends and brought to life some destinations that, maybe some folks had forgotten about. And that's exciting to see. And, hopefully those trends will continue, with resort travel and tourism.
Yes, it's interesting to see that even in the States, like I see that happening so much in Europe, also across the globe, you're finding people are exploring their own countries. They want to be in the outside, they want to be in nature, they want to connect. And hotels are now understanding that they actually are part of the land around them. They can't only just have beautiful facilities. And going forward, where do you see the industry heading? Let's say in the short, mid, and long term, where do you see us going?
Well, in the short term, kind of to your point, there's folks that are getting out there and discovering, their own communities. A lot of that we've seen a lot of repositioning in hospitality, where folks are thinking about their assets differently. They may have a new influx of guests, or they may be trying to cater to a new demographic that they've never really touched on before. We've seen hotels that, have traditionally been, exclusive, more resort destinations or business oriented hotels that have kind of trended more now toward family and creating different amenities, within the framework of their old asset that they've had and looking at it through a different lens. So that's certainly that we've seen in the short term, which I think has been exciting. I've always said that, we really enjoy those type of projects. They're really fun to get into a property and look at it with new eyes and see things that, as an owner, you may walk past every day and have forgotten about. Whereas we say, hey, there's an opportunity here. What if we open that wall up and, create this indoor outdoor environment here, because this backs up to, whatever amenity that could be. And those conversations are fun, and we really enjoy that. In the midterm and the long term, I think what we're hoping to see continue is kind of this lean toward authenticity. As we talked about in the post-pandemic kind of experience, people are more aware of their surroundings. And it's so important that, with so many offerings out there today, right? And in some cases, some of the brand consolidation that we've seen, it's so important for some of these assets to be unique and individual. And, doing that and ingraining yourself within the community and, trying to demonstrate, what you're offering that's different than somebody that's offering something over here, and leaning into those differences a bit, is something that I hope we continue to see, because that really makes it fun from a design perspective. When we get to come in, regardless of what market we're working in the world, and become students of that landscape and understand, what it is that makes this place special, and how do we let that resonate in the design? How do we translate that into site? How do we translate that into programming, to give that complete offering? So we hope that trend, continues in the long term, because I think it will create some inspirational properties and destinations.
With these trends, I like how you highlight that being authentic, and unique to your location. And like anything that becomes a trend, you find many people try to jump on that trend and you lose that authenticity. What are the potential red flags or obstacles you see, while we're seeing such a robust and positive growth? There's always a red flag. Where are
Well, there's trends that we've seen that have been a great help to the industry, and the one I'll cite is technology, right? You've seen a lot of folks leaning into tech, in the guest experience, but it's also speaking to what we were just talking about those authentic experiences. We have to remember why our guests are coming in the first place, and what we're trying to offer them. And yes, it's easy to check in on your app and order Uber Eats and to do all that without interacting with one another. That is certainly convenient, but it's also like we don't want to go too far down that road. We
no?
don't want to necessarily create an experience, because especially when you start thinking about wellness and the community aspects of that, and the positive influences of all those little engagements that you have. And so that's so important that we can definitely embrace the technology, but let's keep that person to person contact. Let's simplify some of that experience, so that guests can again get back to why they're there in the first place.
While you were speaking, I was thinking so true, that community is so important, that engagement. And, as a wellness director and also regional, I've been part of projects which are urban wellness resorts. And that is all about technology, clients who have very little time, that are typical corporate client. And then you mentioned something interesting, that you're seeing this trend of also traditional corporate hotels tapping into that leisure guest. And you then have resorts at the other end of the spectrum, which have generous space. So you can get really exciting, you can create spaces that really allow people to connect with nature and with the community. How do you manage, such extremes? You have resort locations, generous landscape, and then urbans where you are like literally like here in Madrid, sometimes we're stuck in an old building and we can't do anything about that. Beautiful as
Sure.
that might be.
Sure. Well, it depends. It depends on the site, and that's what's really interesting about our business is, working in both of those environments. We're often involved in projects that are, I'll just call it, greenfield development, where you're in a new place and a new destination, and what's so important in that is to understand the site and understand the environment, and really, doing the homework within the, pre-preparation of the design and during the design process, having that top of mind 100% throughout, allows you to deliver an experience that is, when we talk about authentic, it's different in that environment, but we have to recognize what the land is offering and how to take the best advantage of that and preserve the reason you want to build there in the first place, right? And so that's really fun on one extreme, and there's some great examples of that. And then in an urban environment, you're working within the confines of some existing structure, whether it's in the street grid or the building as you described in Madrid. So you look for those other opportunities. You look for ways to engage the community, engage the street, to engage rooftops, to open up spaces, open up windows and opportunities to just let the landscape integrate with the building. And we're seeing so many projects that are being much more aggressive in the biophilic design philosophy, and bringing in landscape into the buildings and into the architecture in a way that is just different, and providing a different perspective and experience from what a guest might expect. And that's exciting in those spaces.
It sounds fascinating because, you work globally across the globe. You have such a diverse portfolio. And I'm just curious because as a wellness leader, when I've been working on new builds and new projects, I sometimes found I was the last person to get involved. I've also had the pleasure to be involved right in the blueprint phase. What's your experience?
Well, it runs the gamut. It certainly, we've had an opportunity to work on, a lot of different hospitality developments around the world, and it all really depends on the owner. And there's a lot of different kinds of owners out there. We work for some groups that may have a whole entire collection of portfolio of hotels, versus working with an operator who or an owner who's this is their family's hotel, and this is their vision to create something unique within their community. So it runs the spectrum, when working with different owners, where we get that, wellness advice involved. And it's so important, though, in either case, to have a strong vision and identity for what you're trying to create, and to communicate, to your design team early in the process what your goals are and what you want to try to achieve. Because I've been involved, and I'm sure you have too, in projects where it's so late in the game, we're having meaningful conversations about how to create special environments, and we're literally getting ready to pour concrete, or we are pouring concrete. That's not the right time for that conversation.
No.
Much, much earlier in the process, so that the design team, and not just the planners and landscape architects, but the architects, the interior design team, all working together to try to bring that vision forward holistically. Get that advice in the earlier stages of the project is so helpful. But also understanding the broader business of hotel development, right? And in our firm, we've had a great amount of experience, so we do have a understanding of the big picture, right? So there's certain metrics that we have to achieve in order to make this whole thing work. And so, trying to pull all that together in the design process is really, one of the most exciting parts of the job, and that aspect of it. So I guess a short answer to your question is, there's a stage of that where we really want to have that input early in the process, to create that vision, and then keep that voice consistent throughout. Not necessarily letting it drive the design, because the owners may have visions for things that they're trying to accomplish, but let that design team know how to bring that forward so that you end up with a product that achieves what you set out to do.
This is fascinating. I mean, my clients are boutique hotel owners, so they are investing their patrimony. And as you said, one of the clients that you also work with is clients, this group of people who want to create something unique and special in their own home countries, in their own place, to engage with integrity, with environment, their community. What advice would you give these owners when they're trying to embark on a project? So they know what is involved, like they've done business, they've set up successful businesses, but they're new to this hospitality experience. What advice can you give them?
I think my first piece of advice would be to be yourself, right? To create something that is, from your heart and from your vision for the community that you're trying to develop. It's important to do your homework and look at case studies and look at, best practices and all of that, but don't try to emulate what you see out there. Try to interpret that to do what you believe is right for your community, because no one's going to know that community better than you. And you're going to be tapped into, what makes it truly special, that that we may not see. And we've seen it on properties and projects before, where we're, going into an operation or a development, and something that is taken for granted, like, oh yeah, that's just normal, and we go, whoa, whoa, wait, that's super special. That's super special. And I could tell you, we did a project in China years ago in Xiamen, and it was on the waterfront. And the local owner and the government representative were like, we got to get all these, junk boats out of here. We're going to create this beautiful marina. We want to do all this modern stuff. And we were like, hold on, time out. Like, like I travel all over the world. This is the coolest thing I've seen in, years. Don't you dare change this, right? And let's lean into that. And so, they took it for granted, because they were trying to be something else, and not themselves. And I think that's my advice, is really to lean into your own identity and trust your gut. And
And when you are working with all these clients, I mean, can you give examples of success stories and also those stories that weren't that successful? Because as you said, they've probably renounced their what makes them authentic. That could be also one of those mistakes. But can you give examples of success stories and why they were a success story?
Oh, there's good success stories. A property that we've worked on recently, the Four Seasons Naviva, in Punta Mita, is, I think, a great success story about creating a resort destination that is really one with the environment, that's creating this incredible atmosphere. I know that's, in a very high-end luxury location, but it's so thoughtfully developed and so thoughtfully operated, that it creates a very bespoke experience that is truly, connected to that environment and connected to that community. And so that's a really great example of that. In talking about other great examples of incorporating wellness, we touched on early about the family aspects and the social aspects of it too. We've seen properties, one that I've been involved with for a number of years, like the Boca Raton, where they've really leaned into the family aspect of it, try to transform their brand and their identity to create a more holistic resort destination experience. Kind of in their case, getting back to their original roots of what the hotel was in 1926 when it was originally built. Those are great success stories on two kind of different ends of scales of resort destination. Where I think we've seen it maybe struggle is where people try to fit in, and I don't want to call anyone out, but they try to fit in everything. They try to
The
do it
whole
all.
kitchen sink.
Yeah, they try to do it all, and you end up watering it down. If you're a boutique operator and you've got a small framework and a small operation, do a few things excellent, and don't try to, create a long menu of things that you're trying to accomplish. Because I think that's where we've seen it get to be challenged, because it gets to be confusing. You end up spending a lot of money on things that maybe don't have the return on investment. The programming is so key to that. So just focusing in on those things that, you can do well and execute would, help you steer away from some of the pitfalls that we've seen other projects fall into.
And out of curiosity, in terms of costing, landscape, clearly there is an investment because it is part of the whole space. That outdoor space is a continuation of that sensory experience. But sometimes I've seen such beautiful landscape and properties be built. But unfortunately, 10 years pass or 20 years pass, they have not been maintained. Either they have undercosted what or underestimated what the cost would do, or they've just not done it right, have not known how to do it. What advice can you give, for example, boutique hotel owners? They're smaller, have smaller capital. What tip can you give them to actually maintain that space, which is so key?
A couple things. It's a fantastic question. I'm glad you're asking, because I would love all the owners out there to to hear this. Think long term about the landscape and the investment that you're making. There are some, things, I'll just call it like landscape infrastructure, drainage, things that aren't pretty, right? That don't immediately result, but have a tremendous impact. Putting in a much more thoughtful, irrigation system, if you're in an environment where we do that, that is, much more, environmentally focused, where it may cost a little bit more in the upfront, but has long-term benefits for, not only economic benefits because you bring your water usage down, but long-term benefits for the landscape. Making investments in those kind of things that may not be intuitive, like I want to see, the biggest and the best beautiful plants and outdoor environments, but getting those things right first. And then two is, having a maintenance plan and a program thought through. We've seen this on properties, particularly where we're blending landscape within the architecture, where there's a strong, decree from ownership. We want to integrate all this planting into the building, and yet they haven't really thought through what it's going to cost to maintain that and how they're going to operate and maintain that, because they're living environments. They require attention and maintenance. And if it's up on
Absolutely.
the third floor on a balcony, how are we getting to that? And are we knocking on a guest door to come in to access that? So there's the thoughtful aspect of the ongoing maintenance that really needs to be part of the conversation early on. And I fear that, too many owners are quick to buy into that vision and want to worry about those problems later. And then what we see happen is hotels look amazing on opening day and they're fantastic. And then, maybe there's an ownership change, maybe there's a management change, and down the road things get, distorted, and that happens. And so the more that we can do up front to have those conversations early, the better.
And, we're seeing this because you touched upon this in the beginning where, we're seeing these last few years where more and more activities are being done outdoors. So hotels are exploring the outdoor area. I know for wellness, we are suddenly building outdoor wellness training areas, but they don't come short of their challenges. So I have been in a scenario where we suddenly said, okay, we're going to make the gym open so one side can open and people can work out, and we're going to build all these beautiful little um, gadgets that can be used outdoors. But we found that that also damages the landscapes. It's not. It wasn't initially thought for that.
Right.
How how do you? What advice do you give us wellness people when we're trying to suddenly use the outdoor as part of our wellness services? How can we integrate it meaningfully?
Well, I would say look beyond, the walls of your property and look at the opportunity you have to make a broader connection within the community. For example, if you're in an urban environment and you have a limited outdoor space where you're trying to, engage the exterior, look at the broader community. There may be a historic trail network that's just a few steps away from your hotel that you may not realize. And, lean into that identity a bit and extend your guests experience into that community asset. I think when that kind of stuff happens, those moments are fun. And I travel a bit and I seek out those opportunities, when I see, hey, we're actually really close to the Appalachian Trail. Let me go check that out for a half hour this morning on a run, rather than being in the hotel gym, with maybe a view of the city skyline. So I think about, just asking owners to just, open, lift your head up a little bit and think differently about where you're located and how you can take advantage of it. Because so much of it is about, getting out there and being part of the environment and being part of the community to find that, self-healing and wellness experience. So,
And to start wrapping up, Scott, you have extensive experience in this field. You've seen it all. I'm sure you have many stories to share. What advice would you give people when they're exploring landscape? Just generally at the points to consider. Some just closing thoughts.
sure. Be a student of your environment. Pay attention to the little things that make the landscape in this particular area unique. And when I say landscape, I don't necessarily mean plants. I right? And what really drives it, because there's so many things, especially, in our world of landscape architecture, people are busy and they go from point A to point B. And if you take a moment to kind of look through a different set of eyes, there's so much to see. And stop and really try to appreciate that environment to give you a better understanding of the context of your development, in the context, whether that's an urban environment or whether that's, a regional environment. I think it still applies. So it's, be a good student. I think that's important, and try to find a sense of appreciation for it, because when you can tune into that, you're going to have a more meaningful design dialogue with your design team. And that design dialogue is going to ultimately enhance the outcome of the project, whether it be a small project or a mega project. It's an important conversation.
Very sage advice. I think, being that continuous student, I think that is when you have that pulse on the ground, you know what's happening and you're evolving with the landscape. As you said, it's a living organism. It grows and we need to grow with that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I mean, this has been a great conversation, and I, appreciate that, you're tuned in to some of the things that make, our job fun, and also the outcomes of the developments that we get the opportunity to work on special, and really ones that, provide a great experience for guests, because at the end of the day, we always think of ourselves as creators of space, places where people can make memories and have great, you know, great life and great experiences.
Scott, you do amazing work. What if someone wants to learn more about landscape architecture? How can they reach out to you and pick your brains?
Well, I would invite everyone to check out our website, edsaplan.com. There's links there to reach out to our team and any of our 8 offices, and connect with us. And let's talk about the opportunities. We do have a global practice, and we'd love to engage in that conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Scott, for your valuable insights.
Thank you. I had a great morning.
Thanks.